Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to Manthan. And following is the podcast with Dr. Prantik Banerjee. He's a professor, author, and a very established academic writer. His books on cultural studies have been listed in the University of Columbia and many other universities. He's also a poet. So, this podcast is a very interesting and a very engaging conversation about numerous topics like culture, which is so much in trend now, also history and also the colonial times. So watch the full podcast. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, click the bell icon, and enjoy the knowledge which you get from our podcast. Thank you.
History has never been written in an apolitical way. Romeo and Juliet. My books. I would be a half Bengali if I were to choose either of them. Kala masala. From traveling in a cafe, Starbucks, and the counter girl says, Prantik! There are ideas even now floating in this room. In fact, close the door, some of these ideas may escape.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to Manthan. And today we have with us Dr. Prantik Banerjee. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting us to your beautiful place and this so aesthetic looking library. And thank you for coming here. So how are you?
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm good. I'm very good, in fact. It's always, I find it very exciting every time I feel I get to meet my outstanding Hislop students. And so when you told me about your podcast, I was as eager to be a part of your Manthan as you people are.
So you were like the topmost in our guest list. So this is like a very good Sapna Pura ho gaya.
You're making it sound more like a hit list, you know.
No.
कोई बात नहीं. All right.
So sir, before we move on to the deep questions of this podcast, I would like to start with a very light question: how to look so young? Because
How to?
look so young, like you. I mean, so what's your age, if I might ask?
So ungentlemanly, man. I mean,
just to make
no. I can answer that question. How?
Okay, yeah, please.
How to look? You said how to look so young.
How are you so young? You're so dynamic.
Be a teacher in Hislop. Because when you are a teacher in Hislop, I get all my dopamines, the good hormones, right, from my students. So when I see every morning, the morning classes which you used to miss, but when I see the morning classes, when I walk into the classroom and I see a bunch of young students all, beaming and smiling, so that's where I get my glow from. So had it not been for my Hislop students, had it not been for students like you, I don't think I would have aged much before.
So even we are the product of your aura. So in that way, we are very blessed.
Thank you.
So moving on, you have been into academics for so many years now. I have this question in mind that did you always want to be a professor? Just tell us about your journey into academics, how you came into it and how things happened.
Well, two things. One, whether I wanted always to be a professor, no, I don't think I was, when I was in school, I ever thought that I would be a professor. But then the journey has been pretty remarkable in the sense that my father was in Indian Air Force. He was in the education department of Indian Air Force. So wherever he was transferred, we had plenty of postings. In fact, he had plenty of postings in a service span of nearly 25, 30 years. We have been in places like Delhi, Kanpur, Sikandrabad, Gwalior, down south also, Belgaum.
Yeah.
So different boards, different schooling, different boards. So it was a very, very, very cosmopolitan and a very, very progressive kind of environment, like military cantonments are, army cantonments are. So one of my formative influences was In fact, my initiation to books, my passion for reading was inculcated in me by my father. And also, I come from a family where on my father's side, my paternal side, two or three of my uncles, in fact, they were professors in Jadavpur University as well as in IIT Kharagpur. So, as and when during vacations I would go to Kolkata, I would walk into their huge libraries. I would see the kind of, the persona, the charismatic persona that they carried. I would see students walking in and walking out of their houses, out of their libraries, and I was very fascinated. It seemed to me almost like an Aladdin's cave, an Ali Baba's cave or an Aladdin's treasure land. And I would marvel at the kind of learning experiences. Sometimes I even would eavesdrop because these professor uncles of mine, they tutored and mentored a lot of students. So I think it was my early exposure, especially during my vacations, that got me thinking that, being a professor is such a remarkable thing. And throughout my education, I was good in nothing except to be a professor. You see, I come from a very extended family on my father's side. My father had 8 aunts, 8 sisters, and all my cousins, right, at that time, they were all into IITs and BITS Pilani. I was the only guy in humanities and arts. Right. So in a sense, I wasn't really labeled as a black sheep, but I suppose there were a lot of things that worked in my favor, contrary to the herd of cousins who were, reading for competitive exams. I was left on my own. I had the freedom to read practically every book that I could grab hold of. And like I said, all these professor uncles of mine had these big libraries to which I had easy access. And that's how I became a professor. Also, the last part, I think in my decision to be a teacher, I had some fantastic teachers, both in school as well as in college and university. I mean, I still carry vivid memories of my English teacher, no wonder, who taught me in Delhi. And it was, you've seen the movie Main Hoon Na?
Yeah.
So, not surprisingly, she was my English teacher, and she had dazzling looks and even more mesmerizing power of language to, captivate us. So, within the first week, when she started taking our classes, in 1 week's time, half the population of the class was head over heels in love with her, and that is, I'm talking about all the boys, right? And she had this remarkable gift of, bringing stories, poems, and plays leap out of the pages. She would make the characters come alive. And she had this fascinating, tone and pitch of the voice, which, merely listening, maybe you wouldn't get it all, but merely listening to her intonation, the rhythm and the cadence, she had a very musical voice. I would be like absolutely bewitched by her. And then through college also, I had some very good teachers who brought out the best in you, teachers who would, for whom not just the front benchers, but the back benchers. Incidentally, I was always a backbencher. So teachers who could reach out and connect with the backbenchers also and do something in class that was very challenging, get the best out of them, make them creative in many ways. So that is, how I wanted to be a teacher. And not for a minute have I regretted my decision to be a teacher. Right.
So, sir, you have been teaching for so many years now. I just have this question. What do you think is a good teacher? Like, in your own terms, what is a good teacher?
Who is a good teacher? One who doesn't teach.
Okay.
By that I mean, Yeah, good teachers, of course. Who's a good teacher? I'll put it in this way. Who's a good teacher? A good teacher is somebody who knows his subject, of course. A good teacher is somebody with excellent communication skills. A good teacher is somebody who can bring out, who can reach out and connect with students, blah, blah, blah. But I think for me, there's a difference between a good teacher and a great teacher. A good teacher becomes a great teacher when a teacher allows, let me take an example. A teacher allows a student to be in the driving seat, teaches the student how to drive, and then lets go. I think I firmly believe that a good teacher becomes a great teacher, not just as somebody who passes on a lot of knowledge and information and Gyana or whatever you call it, but somebody who also brings out the best, somebody who challenges and brings out the best among students, and somebody who can get students to challenge what happens in the classroom space. By challenging, I mean somebody who makes students raise hell by asking a lot of questions.
And to get out of the comfort zone they are, packed in.
Yeah.
So, sir, moving on, now we come to the deep things of our podcast. Culture studies is one of your fortes. You have written so many books on it, which are now prescribed in many top universities. Sir, I want you to break down what culture studies is, what culture is, and why it is important for us to know culture. Because many of even like people of my age don't know what culture study is. For them, culture is जो basic knowledge है culture के बारे में वो ही है. But because I have studied culture studies, I know it is more deep. So I would like you to break down the culture studies, the whole concept, why it is important.
The two questions that you asked are actually related to each other. Who is a good teacher and what culture? Everything that we do in our ecosystem, in our academic spaces is related to culture. And when I say culture, it doesn't mean, since we are talking about our BA literature courses and our MA literature courses, it isn't just about Shakespeare and Hardy and Dickens and the Bronte sisters. Culture, to put it very simply, is what you are, what you do, what you think, how you dress, what you eat, which movies that you watch, which books do you read, even your conversational styles. So, which means culture is everyday practice. You see, one of the things that the reason I felt culture studies should be a part of both, not just our master's course, but even at the BA level, at the undergraduate program. Over the years, I have felt that, that there has been a difference between the way in which our teachers taught us, literature, let us say, and how did they teach us? Well, they were extremely good scholars, extremely good teachers in their own fashion. And so teaching was mostly restricted to, what was there within the textbooks. So they would do a marvelous job of analyzing, interpreting, bringing out the nuances and the aesthetic beauties of, let's say, a Shakespearean play, or maybe a Robert Browning poem, or a Jane Austen novel. But somehow or the other, I felt as if, that in these literature classes, once you stepped into the literature class, whether you were a student or a teacher, once you stepped into the literature class, it's almost as if you were doing the things that you were doing in vacuum, as if the literature classroom or the language classroom had no connection with the world outside. And yet, so I felt that it was time that, there has been in the last 5-10 years, there has been a lot of talk, a lot of chat about how the humanities are becoming obsolete and irrelevant, how science, in an age of science and technology, well, forget about science and technology, in an age of artificial intelligence and cybernetics and what you have, where do humanities stand? And there has been a lot of talk about how closure of English departments, of MA English departments, not just in India, but across, even in Western countries. So I think one of the reasons why culture studies is important is its relevance, its utility, both in terms of its utility from a very practical point of view. To know about culture is to connect yourself with history, with tradition, with your past, but also to know and learn and understand about culture is to connect yourself with what you're doing today, what you're doing in the here and the now, and also to give you a sense of direction in what human society or human civilization will be in the future. So, these are our core values. When you talk about culture, it's not just about parampara. It's not just about sanskar and parampara. Doing something, for instance, talking about selfies in a literature class is not just getting something out of the boxes. It also means that when you're talking about the Elizabethan age or the Renaissance man, you're talking about how people like Shakespeare, Marlowe, the best of writers, the best of thinkers during 16th century England, how they developed a kind of personality. They developed a kind of character, a set of characteristics and traits. And what is a selfie also? Well, you're creating a personality of your own. So, to bring these two not so apparent dots, to connect these two things together is what culture studies is. To look at, to actually make that big leap of 450 years from a Shakespearean play, and then to say, what Shakespeare was doing. Well, Shakespeare was, in Shakespeare's age, nobles, dukes, all from the royalty, they got their paintings done, self-portraits. And what is a selfie? A selfie is an exhibition of yourself, putting yourself out in the best possible manner. So I am interested in connecting the past with the present. I'm interested not just as, a kind of an archaeologist or a historian looking into the crusty pages of archives. No, but to make things that have happened in the past relevant to the present, and with things that you millennials, my millennial students, do that in everyday life.
Right. So the even reading is a culture, right? Yeah. And I can see you are a voracious reader, the library. So what do you think? How the culture of reading has evolved, and if we look at the present condition, the span of concentration has gone down drastically in the Gen Zs. They can't read thick books. Even if you tell them to read a short story in your syllabus, they won't read it. They would search for the summary of the story or watch a YouTube video. How do you think the culture of reading has evolved, and do you think that books won't be in fashion anymore after some years?
Oh, no, not at all. That's a myth. When we belong to the television generation, when television happened, people said the same thing. That, television is going to take away children from books. Internet and computers happened, and you saying the same thing. No, I don't think so. It's not about books getting out of fashion. It's not, books will always continue to, because, books are, it's in our DNA. Reading is in our DNA. The form and the shape of our readings may be different. So today, when you're thinking about books and reading, well, right from audiobooks to what you have on the internet, digital technology has made such a transformed completely. The very idea of what a book is. So a book may not even be in a material form. In fact, these days, though, thanks to the lack of space that I have, and thanks to technology, which allows me to buy more than 100 books on my Kindle, and it's not even about distraction. You see, every generation, I suppose, there is a technology that becomes the black swan moment, a game changer, right? So like television was in the 1980s, and as I just said, people said that it's going to make reading outmoded. The internet, yes. In fact, I would argue just the other way around. I would say that it isn't about distraction. It's also about multitasking. I actually find something very remarkable in today's Gen Z. And the ability to multitask. I mean, you people are, students who are, who have this absolutely wonderful, versatile ability to be on your phones on the one hand, your laptops on the other, and doing perhaps 5 things at the same time. So it's not It's not a matter of distraction. It's an ability to multitask at the same time. And so, yes, you could say that the attention span may have gone down, but I'm not saying drastic. My thing is that if that were so, look at the recent news about how book festivals, a number of literary festivals that are happening. We have in our own city, we have two literary festivals that have come up in the last couple of years. Or to think about the reading cultures that have developed in places like Bangalore, Cubbon Park, for instance, has thrown open their entire precincts for youngsters. And who are the guys who are going there, So recently I read also in Madurai, the public gardens have been opened up and youngsters like you all are thronging the places. So I don't think it's only the coffee houses, the CCDs and the Starbucks that are capturing the imagination of the youth. In fact, youngsters like you are carrying books. And when you are carrying books, it's not just, dead literary artifacts. You're carrying books, meaning you are carrying a receptacle of ideas. And no matter what, a young mind is a creative mind. And as long as young minds thirst for knowledge, as long as young minds are an inquiring lot, neither reading nor books will go out of fashion. Trust me. So long live Gutenberg.
Yes, and I think you talked about the literature fest happening in different cities, and I think they are very well received by youngsters.
Absolutely.
And half the audience is youngsters only.
Absolutely. It's not just the audience also, we are talking about a culture of bookishness. It's not just about listening and taking part in a passive way. Most of the theatre festivals, the army, the workers, the real grassroots people who work behind the scenes are youngsters like you. And they make theatre festivals, literary festivals are working, they are becoming such a big hit only because of young, fresh minds bringing innovative ideas. Right.
True. So you are a poet also. You have two anthologies of poet been published by Pen and even Sahitya Akademi. So how did you get into writing? Because of course you are a voracious reader, but still it takes a lot of effort to sit down and write a page. So how did you get into writing? Because so many books, academics books, poetic collections, short stories.
Writing and reading are, two sides of the same coin. Because ultimately they are about ideas, right? And this writing bug and this reading bug are actually the same virus, right? For me, reading books is also is to have a conversation with the writers and their ideas. Sometimes you like their ideas, sometimes you agree with their ideas. Ideas are like springboards, And so reading, the more you read, the more opinions, the more you form your own intellectuality, let me put it in this way. And so you are having a constant 24/7 dialogue, or shall I say a conversation with people and their ideas that they put in their books.
So have you liked poetry since your childhood?
No, poetry came to me when I was young and when romance was in the air. Right. So, all of us write poetry.
Of course.
Or at least all of us have poems in our head. Right. And there is a certain age where you go through a rite of passage where you want to impress your boyfriend or your girlfriend, right? So the language of love is the language of poetry. Or let me put it in this way, the language of romance is the language of literature. So, so I think it comes naturally to everybody. But yeah, poetry also comes to me naturally. I have written short stories. I am currently toying with the idea of bringing out a novel also. But it's hard work,
Yeah.
It's not like a Sunday poet taster. You think and you sit and say, you know what, I'm going to scribble 4 lines and which looks good enough on a Valentine's Day card. And everybody claims that he or she is a writer these days. Poetry is writing per se. Forget poetry, forget literature. Writing itself is hard work. It needs a lot of discipline. And as someone said, that writing is easy. All you have to do is keep staring at a blank page until drops of blood appear on your forehead. So it's hard work. You need a lot of stamina.
Right.
Writing is what a long distance marathon runner needs. You have to be at your table, you have to be at your desk 30 minutes, 1 hour, anytime.
I actually read somewhere that the most difficult thing about writing is to get your ass on the chair.
Yeah, that's a Stephen King quote. Yeah,
Yes.
that if you want to write, you got to stick your bum to the chair, right?
So post-colonial is also one of your major topics. You like to talk about it a lot, and I think the kind of literature we are seeing now in India and also in abroad, it is the same, that we are moving away from the colonial past and writing our own literature. We are writing a literature from our own lens, not from the master's lens. So please, for the audience, for the layman, break down what post-colonial literature is and why it is important to at some point break away from the master's lens and write your own literature and own culture.
Again, I find a remarkable connection with what we started out. We started out by talking about culture. What is culture, isn't it? What we call post-colonial, basically post-colonial writing emerged from all locations, all parts of the world, which at one time or the other were under the rule of the British Empire or the French Empire or the Dutch Empire. Now, this is a phenomena. We are talking about a historical epoch, more than 300, 200 to 300 years. India itself was under British servitude for more than 100 years or so. You see, every nation, we talk about nation building, isn't it? And we've been talking so much about making in India. But one of the most important things that any nation or forget about nation, people do is what we call a social imaginary. People have, collectively when you stand at a cinema hall, stand up for the national anthem while it is played out, or whether you are in a cricket stadium rooting and cheering Team India, the men in blues, I think there is what we call an imagined community. The nation comes together as an imagined community. Post-colonial literature or post-colonial writing emerged from that kind of a desire or an aspiration. In India, for example, an aspiration to shake off the baggage of the colonial baggage, the British. You only have to watch a Shashi Tharoor talk on YouTube and you'll realize the extent to which the British looted and plundered our country. And when I say looted and plundered our country, not in terms of merely emeralds and jewels and the treasury, but also it was a cultural plunder. It was a cultural loot. Behind it was this ideology of the British Empire that everything that was Gora, everything that the white man did, the white man read, the white man administered, was perfect, superior, intelligent, whereas everything that you and I, the poor natives that we did, were basically savage and barbaric. So I think, this kind of a mindset that we had, because of the long period of imperial rule, one of the ways in which post-colonial writing after India became independent was to free the mind, to liberate the colonization of the mind. With independence was not just the unfurling of the Tiranga, but also to unshackle the cultural chains with which the British had bound us, trapped us into believing and accepting the fact that, that the West is superior, the West is mighty, and never shall the twain, the West is West and the East is East, as Rudyard Kipling said, and never shall the twain meet. So, right from the freedom fighters, right from Gandhi writing his book, right from people like Gandhi and Nehru, to post-independence writers like an R.K. Narayan, a Raja Rao and a Mulk Raj Anand, to contemporary writers, what you find is a kind of a very fascinating narrative where voices that were silenced or voices that were neglected, forced by a foreign rule, people wanted to rewrite, or rather write their own narratives, rewrite history. It's not just literature. Post-colonial writing is not just related to literature alone, but also the rewriting of history. So a lot of people wanted to rewrite the history, a history that was primarily written by Western travelers, Western colonizers, and to bring these voices from the margin, voices that had been silenced. So this is something very phenomenal, and it's taken almost 75 years, 80 years that today when you think of literatures in English. Earlier, maybe 70 years back, we talked about English literature. But now it's absolutely foolhardy to be talking of only English literature because we've kicked out the colonial mentality. And for us, English literature doesn't mean any longer American literature or for that matter, British literature. It means literatures that are coming from South Asia, literature that comes from Australia, Canada, Africa. These together, and there's a huge variety of it, constitute what is called post-colonial literatures rather than literature.
So it all starts from the Macaulay's 1 minute, and I think from there we are into that same vacuum. So do you think that Macaulay's 1 minute still affects us? Because it's somewhere I believe that we are still the products of Macaulay's 1 minute. Do you feel the same?
No, I don't think so. Look. It's like, blaming the English for leaving behind Angrezi. I think now we would be fooling ourselves if we thought that, there's no need for English. It's not just the question of the Queen's English or the King's English that I'm talking about. I'm talking about Indian English. I'm talking about African English. I'm talking about Australian English. I'm talking about a Maori variety. I'm talking of New Zealand, for example. The Maoris have also come out with their own variety. So, language per se does not follow the tyranny of any empire, howsoever mighty it is. It's what we do with language. And I think there is enough space in India, at least. You see, the concept of India as a nation, think about the plurality that makes India. All right? Think about the diverse religions, the diverse languages and the castes and the creeds that we have. To think about that is also to participate, is to bring a samvad, not just with Hindi, right? But also our bhashas, all the regional bhashas. And English, you see, is no longer a part of our colonial makeup. No. It's a language of empowerment. It's a language. Tomorrow, you see, you as the millennials are going to walk into a corporate world or maybe any workplace, forget the corporate world, but any workplace where the medium of communication or conversation is going to be English. And need not necessarily be, you don't have to speak like an American call center. Nor do you have to, measure
fake
up
your accent.
Yeah, nor do you have to measure up what King Charles is going to be speaking about. The thing is that in the plurality of cultures, in the diversity of cultures, the world has become a globalized village, isn't it? And there is one medium, the English becomes the one medium which brings so many people, together. It's like English has become the cloth of the united colors of Benetton.
True. But sir, do you think that English literature has somewhere suppressed the Bhasha literature? Because if you see in the commercial world, even in India, if I go into a bookstore, I won't find Hindi books anymore, but I'll find a whole shelf of English books stacked up.
To a certain extent, yes. What you say, there is merit in what you say, but I won't buy the argument, all of it. If you ask me, yes, in the last 30 years, maybe 30 years before, yes, there was, if you wanted to be recognized in the global literary field, then of course, English was the only, so you had to write, But then think about especially in the last 20, 25 years, some of the best works in Bhasha literatures have been translated and made available, and there is some excellent translation work that is happening. So, yes, till the 1990s, when you thought about Shashi Tharoor or a Salman Rushdie or an Arundhati Roy, these were young writers who came after woodwork, and every Indian who wanted to win the Commonwealth or the Booker Prize was writing in English. But things have changed, isn't it? Things have changed, and now translation, there's a lot of good translation work, and English writers are collaborating. In fact, bilingual writing has become something very common, isn't it? Right. And so plenty of good work in translation is happening. So again, like I said, there's so much of reading. Again, it points out to the fact, what I disagreed with you. It points out to the fact that reading is thriving. Books are, look at the number of books. Just check out on how many books are listed every day on Amazon, and not just books in English, but regional languages also. So, which means unless there is a reading community, unless there are readers, books, why would publishers keep on bringing out books?
True. So I think literature and media shapes our mind. It puts in a narrative inside us. And one of your field is also media studies, film and media studies. So what do you think, how is movies and media are shaping our mind? And do you think that somewhere they're setting up a narrative which the consumer is consuming?
Everything that we do is saleable in this world now.
Right.
In fact, it's only saleability that gives you visibility, right? Even this podcast that you're doing, right? You would be hoping to have the maximum number of subscribers, isn't it? So whether you are actually creating a meme on the for the internet, or you're writing a 250-page book, I think gone is the old-fashioned thought of romanticizing the writer or any creative artist, the artist in his garret living in poverty and leaving something like a Vincent van Gogh did, If you really want to make your work known, right, there you cannot discount the role of media. You got to immerse. Today we are talking about an immersive media, and an immersive media is something where whether you are a painter, whether you are a writer, whether you are a photographer or a podcaster, media, it is through the technology, the new media technologies that we make it possible for what we are doing for a wider community of people, right? So technology, I firmly believe that the more of technology we have, the better it is for the world of art, in fact. Yeah. And the two things are not incompatible. That there is no polarization between, in a sense, you could say there's no polarization that I see between science and technology on the one hand and humanities. Although just a few minutes back I was talking about the humanities being in a crisis. But what I suggest is, therefore, that the way forward for art, literature, cinema is basically to make more and more use of technology, make it more technology empowered, right? Because think of any period in history, right from the pyramids in Gaza to today's world of the internet. It is only technology that has made possible that has made possible the growth and the progress of human culture. So for me, technology is the handmaiden of all creative things. If you allow me one more minute, I mean, it's like, one of my icons is Steve Jobs. Not because he is the guru of gadget. Of course, he is the guru of gadget. But for me, Steve Jobs is somebody, who he was a technological artist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I would call him the ultimate romanticist of the late 20th and the early 21st century. Walter Isaacson, his biographer, calls Steve Jobs as a magical genius. Because what Steve Jobs wanted to do was to re-enchant the world by bringing together technology with art.
Right.
I would see the world, for me, forget the world, but I would see every teacher doing in the class in something similar, maybe not on that grand scale, but something similar, getting the best of technology, getting high tech to tie up with high touch.
True. So if we talk about media, the media is mostly ruled by the Western world. We can say that, of course. So, do you think that we consume social media? The Indian, as an Indian, we consume media, and somewhere the Gen Zs are very highly influenced by the Western world, by the Western thoughts, and in that process, they are somewhere losing their own roots. Do you think the media is working that way also? And do you think it's a negative side?
Call me an eternal hopeless optimist. uh, yeah, you may say that technology is controlled by the Western world. We are talking about first world countries. So whether, you're talking about somebody like Elon Musk, for instance, right? So whether it is Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates, to a certain extent, yeah. But then, once technology is out there is absolutely no reason why the so-called, it goes beyond one's influence. So you have an entire army of influencers, right? Influencers meaning idea changers who are coming out from different parts of the world. Can you think about, let's say, maybe 30, 40 years back, a Korean band gaining global popularity. I mean, so without technology, without media, look what it's not. I wouldn't label technology or media any longer as Western technology or Western media, because once the technology is out there, it's everybody's. It's to what use you put it. And that's the reason why K-pop, something like K-pop has happened. That's the reason why so much of so much of ideas that are being produced and consumed are coming from different parts of the world.
See, you almost all your life, you have been in touch with the Gen Zs. Most of the life, regular contacts.
That's the secret of my aura. You said no glow.
So, but there are some very dark sides of the Gen Zs. But what do you think? What is the future, and how do you look at our generation? How do you look at it?
With endless possibilities. I look at your generation where, just think about it. Think about the opportunities think about what you're doing right now in this space, right? Using technology, right, once again to do something very creative, and not just doing something creative, but, getting conversations going. What Manthan? Your podcast is called Manthan, isn't it? Which is basically a churning. No, the Sanskrit word is churning, right? So, this Amrit Manthan that is happening right now, and with previous podcasts that you have done, is basically a churning of ideas. And, you see, every generation has what you call the dark side, right? But not every generation, no generation surrenders to dark weather, no? I mean, there are always inordinate, endless opportunities for this generation to do some very, very exciting things, right? And I feel that when I started out I started my student days, my career, technology wasn't so advanced, and so the scope was very limited. But with you people, I mean, even, an art student, when I say even an art student, I don't mean in a hierarchical way, but even the possibilities are endless. And therefore, you see, can you think about a course, let us say, in the IITs, for instance, right, where an IITian is studying computer science with music? Can you think? And that's the way forward, really, that we mold and make minds of Gen Z in such a way that we are able to give to them multiple intelligences. By multiple intelligences, I mean, giving, for example, a linguistic intelligence with a mathematical intelligence, giving them an interpersonal intelligence with intrapersonal intelligence, giving them a spatial intelligence with an artistic intelligence. The capacity that you have, the human mind has an infinite capacity to evolve and change. And technology makes it such a wonderful tool, so long as you are using it as a tool and not allowing it to be your master.
Right. So you are working on a very interesting project, which traces Nagpur to Nashville, something like that. I heard one of your lectures. I forgot the theme of it, but it's a very interesting thing. So I would like you to share with the audience, because history is a very popular subject at present. The amount of history podcasts are there on internet, it's amazing. So and this is a very interesting actually thing that you are coming up with. So please break down for us, what's that?
I'm collaborating with a professor from the University of California. See, this happened again during the pandemic. Again, thanks to technology. We were on a Zoom platform giving our talks, and we happened to know that we have a shared interest in history and literature. So the project that I'm involved in has a Nagpur connection. It has a deep connection. This gentleman, Professor Vinay Lal, he was looking out for some information. He wanted to find some information about a teacher, in fact, a physical instructor teacher who was in Hislop in the 1950s, right? And one Mr. Lawson. And so he got in touch with me and asked me if I could check out our college library to find out if there are some photographs or some even articles or press releases having his name. So I did a bit of, archiving, digging deep, being like an archaeologist. And what I found was a remarkable connection. The connection is this, that Mr. Lawson, who was a physical educationist, a physical instructor in our college, 1950s and 1951 to 52 or 53, at one point in time, he used to go to Sevagram. Right. And he stayed there and he got influenced by Gandhi's writings. Right. So it was during this, his reading and his apprenticeship with Gandhian philosophy, and he went back to the United States. And this was around the same time that the civil rights movement in the United States was at its fiercest. When we talk about the civil rights movement, I'm talking about the movement, the freedom struggle or the rights struggle, the anti-segregationist struggle led by Martin Luther King. Till that point in time, it was a rather violent struggle, right? And more black youth were coming onto the streets with, guns and bullets and name it. It was a very kind of fortuitous meeting between Mr. Lawson and Martin Luther King, where Lawson introduced Martin Luther to the philosophy of Satyagraha, to Gandhi's philosophy of Satyagraha and Ahimsa. And it's amazing how something that Gandhi did 30 years back here in India, separated by thousands and thousands of miles, how the founding principle, the guiding philosophy of our own freedom struggle, our own Swarajya movement was taken forward by Reverend Lawson. He was a priest, by the way. So it was taken forward by Reverend Lawson. He goes to America. He meets Martin Luther King. He introduces Martin Luther King to the political efficacy of Gandhi's Ahimsa and Satyagraha movement, and they adopt it, they embrace it. And what follows is a non-violent revolution. A non-violent revolution against race. And and the connection that we are working with, the project that we are on is how much of Gandhi's writings were taken, were sort of exported by Reverend Lawson to Martin Luther King, and how much of that in turn also influenced somebody like Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Isn't it amazing that a trail, such a wonderful epic historical narrative of one principle of ahimsa or non-violence could actually harbor not one freedom struggle in India, but also a black revolution in the United States, followed by another in South Africa, where Nelson Mandela led a nearly 25-year struggle against apartheid.
True.
And it all began from our hometown,
Nagpur.
Nagpur.
Such an interesting connection that is.
Absolutely.
Talking about history, sir, now there is this trend that that history is being rewritten, and many authors like Dr. Meenakshi Jain, Vikram Sampath, and there are many. They are writing the history from a right wing lens. We can call that, but they give references and it's very it's very manya like hai. But what do you think that? Do you think that this process is necessary? Because history has been filtered. History has been put into us in a very monochromatic narratives, and now we have these waves where the alternate history of the violent struggle is being put out in public. What do you think about this process that is happening?
History has never been written in an apolitical way. Let me start by saying this, right? All of the 60s and the 70s till the early 1990s, predominantly history and historians were left-leaning. So a lot of narratives about, not just about the freedom movement, about in our independence struggle, but also about basically Western history, was written from a very Marxist point of view, right? Yes, there is a recent rewriting of history, including a rewriting of NCERT syllabus that is prescribed in schools. The point really is that there is no single history. I believe that there are many histories, right? And it's not about whose history is more authentic, more legitimate. History is also a story. Any historian, no matter how objective and unbiased he or she claims to be, after all, presents to us a narrative of something that has happened in the past or something that is even happening in the present through a lens. Whose lens? His lens or her lens. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it becomes a distortion. What it does is that it gives you perspectives which you can agree, disagree, challenge, rewrite, but it also belongs to the whole fabric of alternative, what you call alternative stories, right? So, history has always been written by those who could write, which means mainstream historiography has been written by those who have been in power, by those groups that have been the ruling class, by those groups that have been the dominant. But then, you see, once again, technology comes into play. Today, whether you're talking about the blogs written 20 years back, from 20 years onwards, or whether you're talking about our social media forums, for instance, a lot of talk, a lot of chitter chatter that is happening is about history. Yeah. But then again, history is no man's territory. It is no man's colony, right? One cannot claim that there is one true, authentic history. Yes, again, it builds a kind of a samvad. Yes, there are differences of opinion. Yes, there is sometimes a dominant ideology which you can see working its way through especially the manner in which school syllabus and college and university curriculum are being redesigned. Of course, it is. But that is not something that is happening today. It's always happened in the past also. Much of Roman history, much of Mughal history, you talk about the great historians, were basically attempts to write a particular version of history. And that has also been continuously challenged. And this history, or this right-wing, what you call right-wing version of history, is also being continuously challenged. So,
it's an everlasting process.
But what it does is that if you are a reader of history, if you are a history buff, you need to be well informed. You need to also have that critical ability, to analyze and not agree to something blindfoldedly.
And I think it's a good trend that that we are lucky that we are seeing both the sides of history, the left and the right. So I think it's not a very problematic thing. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. See, and also, when you're talking of history, we're not just talking of ruling of empires and kingdoms, is it? There's a history of science, for example. There is a history of technology, and such kind of histories are even more are equally important to read, because then you get to know also that when you read something like the history of medicine, take what happened during the pandemics. So much of our reading and our understanding of the pandemic, what was happening during the coronavirus, came when we went back to history and read so much about the Spanish influenza, isn't it? And so it gives you a sense of perspective. It gives you a sense of understanding, which you bring in to make sense of the world around you. Yeah.
So moving on, we are towards the end of the podcast. As we talked about, the span of concentration is decreasing, so we have some time bounds. My last question is very important, actually. Literature has been a part of your life since childhood, and you have taken it along all your life. How has literature shaped your life, and how has it shaped you as a person you are today? What is the influence of literature on the self you are today?
Oh, it's shaped me for an eternity, I would say. What I have been reading from childhood, and what I continue to read even today is part of a never-ending process of learning. Earlier you asked me who's a good teacher, no? A good teacher is a lifelong learner. And some of the best things that have happened in literature classes and language classes is my learning a lot from you students. The most aha and eureka moments that have happened in class are those moments where it is a student who has opened up a perspective or who has given me a different insight into something that I had thought I had known and understood. And this is a remark, and I consider myself very, very privileged, to be a teacher. Because a teacher is not really somebody who, molds and a million minds, as the cliche says. It's also, for me, it works the other way around equally. And to allow a million minds to mold myself. And my growth in all these years, this lifelong romance with books has been made possible also because of some of the richest ideas and the brightest spots have come from students, from young minds like you. What I am today, well, there are no full stops to it, as long as you keep on writing. And writing is one thing, writing is a bug. So as long as you're reading and writing, you are continuously discovering a new dimension or a new facet of yourself, right? While writing and reading, everything that you do in life, which involves your creativity, is a process of self-discovery for you. So every class in Hislop, even today, is a process of reinventing myself. And every class also, despite the number of years that I have taught, every class feels as if it is my first day in college and my very first classroom experience.
True. So what are your future plans? Are there more books coming out recently? Because you are close to retirement now, and you will have as much time as you have to write wonderful novels, wonderful poetry.
Yeah, retirement plans, well, I don't think I'm ever going to retire in that sense, because I've grown up with books, and I've never aged with books.
True.
Books and writing keep you forever young, right?
Has kept you alive.
It's kept me alive, yeah. It's like saying, I read and I write, therefore I am. So there are a couple of projects, of course. One of my dream projects is to write a book on books, booksellers, and bookshops.
Nice.
So that is something that I would like to do, especially the kind of places, the bookish places like College Street in Kolkata, or Bangalore or Hyderabad, the places that I used to go. You guys have got it very simple. Everything is there on the net these days. But for us, reading a book also meant, first of all, the Herculean task, or let's say like Ulysses, you had to embark on a long, long odyssey, in order to find the book. So one of my future projects is to write a book on books, particularly booksellers, second-hand booksellers, and the history of book reading in India.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. So thank you for coming on Manthan, and you are such a personality that we hope to extract more of the knowledge from your fantastic mind, because we can talk about so many topics with you in very detail that the podcasting list with Dr. Prantik Banerjee is never ending. So we hope that you come again on Manthan. And just for the audience, how was your experience of being on this podcast?
Brilliant. Like I told you, Manthan has been true to its name, the name that you have given. It's been such a churning of ideas, right? And to speak to young minds and to know that this is going to be broadcasted is also one more reason why I believe that I'm never going to get old, because what we did just now, to know that it's going to be put out there, and to know that there are going to be responses and comments, and there are going to be conversations, that is what I call samvad, isn't it? Right? So it's been a wonderful experience.
Thank you, sir.
So this Manthan has not been just Manthan, it's been Amrut Manthan.
So we hope to have more podcasts with you in future, and we'll have fun.
Thank you, Ninad.
And thank you for inviting us to this wonderful place, and it's such a beautiful backdrop to have. Do we have rapid fire?
Yes, we do.
We have rapid fire from our crew member.
Yeah.
What do you prefer most? Writing in a cottage or a cafe?
In a cottage, yeah. On an island by myself.
Okay. Night owl or early bird?
Early bird. I'm an early bird.
Because Chacha Chaudhary or Panchatantra?
Both. Absolutely.
You have to pick one.
Both. No. Panchatantra and Chacha Chaudhary.
Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet or A Midsummer's Night Dream?
Romeo and Juliet.
Okay. Your favorite book so far?
My books.
Okay. A non-fiction you would recommend to today's generation?
One book.
Yes.
One book. Yuval Harari's, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
Okay.
Read that. Very, very prophetic, and gives you a lot of ideas about what your future holds for you.
Last but not the least, Roshogulla or Shondesh?
I would be a half Bengali if I were to choose either of them. Give me Roshogolas, but bring on the Shondesh as well. That makes me a bong.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm not a very writing or into stuff, but I would like to know, how do you overcome your creative block?
Writer's block. That's a good question, actually. Writer's block.
Because when we think about Gen Z, we are mostly stuck there. We have ideas and we think most of our ideas are somewhere from else.
For me, writing also is part of, traveling is for me gathering material for my writing. So I get a lot of my kala masala from traveling. I'm a travel freak. I love to, I'm forever bitten by the wanderlust. So recently, I go to places like Hampi, for instance, or places like Sanchi, I also go to places like Indore, to the Chappan Bhog street. I listen to conversations. For me, whenever I am in that spot, what you call the writer's block, I listen to people. I keep my eyes and my ears open. So whether I am in a cafe, Starbucks, and the counter girl says, Prantik! And I get that peculiar thing about a girl at the counter mimicking in a tone which gives me a kind of a thought. What is it that makes her speak in that way? So I get to know her. Or if I am in Hampi and I am in the ruins of the Vijayanagara Empire, it makes me feel as if I am through a time machine. I'm back in a time machine and I just kind of imagine. So, writer's block, there's actually, this whole thing about writer's block is again a much hyped myth. Right? There are stories all around you. There are ideas even now floating in this room. In fact, close the door, some of these ideas may escape. It's only when you're brain dead that you are in a writer's block. Because so long as you are alive and human, this grey matter between your ears is constantly giving you some idea or the other. You see, a genius is somebody who doesn't think one great idea in a year. We all are geniuses in that way. But the difference between us and a true genius is a genius gets many of his ideas all at the same time, rather waiting for that one aha moment in 365 days.
Okay. Another informal question I have is like, I have seen you in the morning, like, and Kritika, you must have seen, we do hang in college like 7 a.m. And you are there walking. So it is for fitness, or you are just overthinking? Like, we do have an inside joke that Prantik sir just, goes through the corridor all along, then he just goes to department again and sits in front of laptop and like and types the story.
You hit the bullseye. Walking for me is ideating. I get a lot of ideas, right? So, right from the twittering of the birds, early morning there is no hangama, there is no halchal, right? Right from the twittering of birds that I hear to the echo of my own footsteps in an empty college. Do you know how much pleasure it gives sometimes when you are in the same space where from 10 onwards there's going to be madness? So yeah, I do that walking for both things. I am a compulsive fitness freak. So I do my 10,000 steps in college, other than my 6 kilometers walk in the morning. Okay. So I do that. And I also do that not just for sweating it out and burning calories, but also for getting ideas. Did you also see me sometimes muttering?
That's why I thought like he must go to department, open his laptop and start writing the story, and that's how he brainstormed.
Ye to such hai. Yeah. This is not an urban myth.
Okay. That's all I think.
So thank you, Bhavna, for that shootout. Okay, all right. And I passed your test.
Yes.
Yeah? Good.
So this was Dr. Prantik Banerjee on Manthan. Thank you for watching. Be with us for such more engaging conversations. Like, share and subscribe. Thanks for joining. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.